The idea of buying a condominium is so ideal for a lot of people. The idea of maintenance free, lock and leave. So there's a lot of great things about condominiums, but then there's some surprises too, because yes, you own the property, it's yours, but just because it's yours doesn't mean you can do whatever you want with it. Each condo association does have its own set of rules and regulations that you as an owner have to abide by, and sometimes people are a little surprised about some of these rules. So in this video, I want to share with you some of these common rules that you need to think about, keep in mind, but then also never fear, there's a way that you can know for sure that this condominium that you're interested in is going to be a good fit for you, so you're not taken by surprise later on after you close. Hi, I'm Jill Thomas. I'm a real estate agent here in the Sarasota, Florida area on the west coast of Florida. We're just south of Tampa, and each week I bring new videos about things like this, condominiums, videos related to real estate here in our area and in the state of Florida. And then I also bring videos about what it's like to live in the Sunshine State. So if you're thinking about coming, going, buying, selling, whatever the case may be, then this might be a really good channel for you to follow. So hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and keep on watching. Now I'm going to confess something to you guys. When I first got my license in 2008, I was a little overwhelmed about the idea of working with condominiums, with buyers and sellers. And I remember sitting in my real estate class and they were talking about different laws in the state of Florida, and I was feeling pretty overwhelmed. And I thought, who in the world would ever want to sell a condo? I'm so scared to do this, because I just felt really nervous because I wanted to do a good job for you. Well, it's okay. Now I've sold, dozens, if not hundreds of condominiums. I've been involved in a lot of transactions with condos, and it's okay. So there are some protections for you as the buyer or even as a seller. And so in this video, I'm going to cover those things as well to help you out, so you don't have to have that same type of anxiety. So here we go. 7 things that you need to know about condominiums and their rules. Number 1, rental restrictions. Okay, rental restrictions are huge, and I think this might be one of the most overlooked rules that people just don't even consider when they're talking about buying a condominium, because buying something, especially for short-term rentals, so you're thinking like Airbnb, VRBO type of things, I can use it some, rent it out a lot, super ideal concept. So I totally get it. And, lock and leave. I don't have to worry about mowing the lawn, taking care of things on the outside. So it's a really great concept to purchase a condominium that does permit short-term rentals. But here's the thing, not all condominiums allow short-term rentals. And when I say short-term, I think more like weekly or maybe, 2 weeks or less, even a few nights at a time. There really aren't a ton in our area that allow short-term rentals like that, where you can have that mixed use if you want. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So here's what's really important for you to understand is every single condo association does have rental restrictions, and there's 2 main components to these rental restrictions. First of all, there's a minimum amount of time that you can rent the property for. So for instance, the rules might say no less than 1 week at a time, no less than 2 weeks at a time, no less than 1 month at a time, or 3 months or 6 months. Some even say no less than 1 year at a time. Now you can always rent it for more. It's not that it has to be exactly a week. If it's 1 week minimum, it just means you can't rent it for 5 days, but you can certainly rent it for 20 days. That would be okay. Just no less than 1 week. All right, so that's really important. So what's the minimum amount of time that you can rent the property for? The second aspect, the second component of all of this is how often you can rent it for. So let's suppose an association says 1 month minimum. You can't rent it for 3 weeks or 2 weeks, but at least 1 month. So in most people's minds, they naturally think, okay, if it's 1 month minimum, that means I should be able to rent it up to 12 times a year, because of course 12 times 1, you got 12 times. And so that would fill out the whole year if you did rent it out for just 1 month at a time. But some associations will say, nope, you can only rent it out 3 times a year or 4 times a year. So even though it's 1 month minimum, doesn't mean that you could potentially rent it up to 12 times. So you have to check what the rules say. Even sometimes for weekly rentals, you would assume, okay, I should be able to rent it up to 52 times a year. Well, the rules might say 20 times a year, something like that. So you really need to understand what those rental restrictions say for that association. And then one other thing that does come up on occasion is sometimes the association will say you have to own the unit for at least 1 year or 2 years before you can rent it out at all. And they do that to cut down on the number of investors who just come in, scoop up a bunch of properties just to rent them out. They don't want it to turn into like an apartment complex where you've got different tenants in all the time. So sometimes we see that. So these are those 3 things you need to be aware of. Minimum amount of time, how often in 1 year you can rent it, and then is there a restriction such as a time of ownership before you can rent it out at all. Now, if you are interested in short-term rentals, the number one place in our whole area to find those are on Siesta Key. Number one beach in America, okay? And so there's a ton of places out there that do allow short-term rentals, whether maybe it might be 2 weeks, 1 week, or even nightly, or maybe 3-4 night minimum. There's also some places a little bit farther north up, like maybe Anna Marie Island, Holmes Beach. There's a few places here and there. There's a couple scattered out on Longboat Key, but concentrated Siesta Key. And then there's a few here and there. There's also some more up in the West Bradenton area that do allow short-term rentals, but please know they're just not like everywhere. You're not going to find them in Palmer Ranch. You're not going to find it in Lakewood Ranch. Those are really areas where rental restrictions are more strict. They're very conservative in that regard. And then of course, because these places are in Siesta Key, you're going to be paying top dollar for it. If you're looking for a $300,000 condo where you can do short-term rentals, you're not going to find it on Siesta Key. So I'm sorry for that, but we do have some other places scattered here and there that might be a help to you. So first thing, rental restrictions. Huge, huge, huge in our area. Number 2, pets. Now, when people let me know that they're considering a condo, and when I say condo, it could be villa or even a townhouse, one of the first questions I ask is, do you have any pets? And people are sometimes surprised by that, but every association is either going to say, yes, pets are allowed, or no, they're not. And the no is a hard no. There's no exceptions unless, of course, it's a service animal or something like that. And that's a conversation for another day. But if it's yes, then it's just not yes, you can have however many pets you want, any types of dogs. There could be further restrictions. So that's what I want to share with you, are these extra restrictions. So first, the association is going to say what kind of pets you can have. And then it's not unusual if there's a limitation on how many. So when we talk about what kind of pets, I mean, they could say, yep, you can have cats or dogs, cats and dogs. It could be you can have cats and birds, but no dogs. It could be you can have up to 2 pets. So that would mean 2 dogs, 2 cats, or 1 dog, 1 cat. And these associations are pretty strict about these things. It's not real loosey-goosey at all. So I want to plant that in your head right now that they're pretty firm on these things. Sometimes too, it'll say like maybe no exotic pets. Maybe they don't want you to have birds, because I know people who will have parrots and things like that, and they don't want these parrots or birds to be outside on the balcony or on the lanai and squawking and making noise. So that's really important if you do have pets, that we need to discuss this. Now, besides the type of animals and the number of animals, when we're talking about dogs, there could be extra restrictions, and typically that has to do with the breed and the weight. So some associations will say no aggressive breeds, or they'll even list breeds that you cannot have. So that's a really big deal. And then besides that, there is often weight limits, a weight restriction that might say no more than 10 pounds. We're talking pretty small animals, 10 or 12, 15 pounds, 20 pounds, could be 30, 50, even 100 pounds sometimes it'll say, or no weight restrictions. So that's a good thing if you have a bigger dog, but not a lot of associations do allow really huge dogs. I'll say that. And there's a few out there, but there's not a ton. And then also there could be even a height limit. So maybe it'll allow maybe these short, chunkier dogs, that are hefty, that weigh more, but they're not very tall. So they want the shorter dogs. So there's a lot of different things involved with that. So when I ask you, if you have pets and you say yes, they say, okay, let's talk more about that. What do you have? Tell me about your dog. I'll sometimes specifically ask, what kind of breed is it? How much does it weigh? And sometimes I'll get answers back like, oh, it's a medium-sized mixed dog. But that, as you can see, that's not sufficient enough for me to help you find the right kind of property, because they're very specific on breeds. They're very specific on the weight. So please be aware of how much your dog weighs, if you are looking for a condominium, because that can really make it or break it for a lot of places. So number 2 thing you really have to be aware of are pets. Number 3, vehicles. Believe it or not, there's some condo associations that will limit what kind of vehicle you can have. Of course, commercial vehicles, that most people can accept pretty well, but Some places do not allow trucks or motorcycles. I had a listing for a condominium up in Bradenton a few years back, and they just had carport parking or open parking, so there was no garages or anything like that, and it was very specific. No trucks. You could have an SUV, but not a truck. And some of those trucks were more expensive than 2 or 3 of the cars in the parking lot, but they weren't permitted. So you want to be aware of that, and again, motorcycles can also be a thing. There's a community on Longboat Key, a condo complex that does not allow motorcycles, but in the condo docs, it says you can take your motorcycle, push it to the front gate, start it, and then leave. And then when you get to the front gate, turn it off and push it back to your parking spot. And there are people that do that. So you want to be aware of what type of vehicle you have, because they may not be permitted in the association that you're looking at. Number 4, a common restriction or common rule is age-restricted communities. So as you can imagine here, we have a lot of retirees that come down. So we have a good number of 55 plus communities. So please, when you're asking about condominiums, let me know if 55 plus is something you'd consider or not. Some people prefer to be around, they want to be around families and kids and things like that. And then some folks are like, nope, I'm done with that. I want to be in a 55 plus community, or maybe you're open to either one. So that's a big thing here, are 55 plus communities. Number 5, the great outdoors. Now let's talk about the outside of your unit. Some associations will allow you to put your own personal expression outside, and some do not. So you want to be aware of that. Maybe you can put a wreath on the front door or do some little things out front. And again, it depends if you're, more in an apartment style condominium, where you got a mid-rise or high-rise, or if you're in a villa, things are more just horizontal. So there's different ways that we could look at this, but you just want to be aware of what you can do and what you can't do. Or some places will let you put up maybe some Christmas lights on the balcony at Christmas time, or do some different things at holidays, but it might specifically say, okay, within 2, 3, 4, 5 days after the holiday is over, then those decorations need to come down. Very typical. If there is a balcony, if there is a railing, that like you're not allowed to put towels, you're not allowed to hang clothes up outside. That's pretty universal. I've not really seen any places where you're allowed to hang up things outside to dry, whether it's your laundry or just beach towels. So that's usually a big no-no. But you want to just be aware of it, because honestly, if anything, it might just be embarrassing that if you weren't aware of it, if you were truly ignorant of the situation, and then you had somebody come to you and say, hey, you got to take that down, or you need to change that. And then you might feel really bad. Other things about outside is you need to know, can I have a gas grill? Some villas allow those. A lot of regular condominiums don't allow them. If anything, like you can maybe have a freestanding electric grill out in the balcony, but usually gas grills are not allowed. But you want to know what you can get away with and what you can't, just so you don't get yourself into hot water with the association. So just be aware that there are rules about what you can do outside. Number 6, flower beds and plants. Now this maybe is a little bit more for your villas, where there's actually you just walk right into your front door and it feels a bit more like a house, even if it's a duplex or something like that. But sometimes you are allowed to express yourself creatively there with gardening. So just because, the association will mow all of the land and maybe trim trees and things like that, you might be able to still do some plantings. So for instance, I just got a sweet lady under contract in a 55 plus community where, of course, they take care of all the general grounds work. But specifically in the condo docs, it says that the owner is responsible for all of the gardening 3 feet out from the structure. So that's nice, because if you do want to plant some flowers or maybe grow some tomatoes, something like that, you can still do that with a lot of places. Now, if you're not in a villa, you want to check to see, okay, am I allowed to have potted plants on my balcony or on the lanai? What can I do if you do want to have a little bit of gardening, or because you can do some really great container gardening, or just have a beautiful potted plant. Something else too with the outdoor, like I could have said in the last point, is also not unusual that if you are away at all and you own a condominium, you have to bring in everything from the lanai into the house, or in from the balcony, because if there was a storm or something, they don't want things blowing around. So if you're gone for an extended period of time, you'd have to bring in all your lanai furniture, any plants, anything that you have outside like that could be picked up by the wind. So just keep that in mind as well. But a lot of places you can still do some lovely little gardening, even though you're not responsible for all the other grounds maintenance. You just can't go and dig a new flower bed into the backyard, or somewhere on the grounds. It just is going to be the flower beds around the unit itself. Number 7, buying with confidence. Okay, so I touched on a good number of items for you to keep in mind that are super important, that come up quite often when people are looking at condominiums. But I didn't talk about everything. So how can you know as the buyer what place will work? You don't want to buy a place and then days, weeks, months later you find out, oh my goodness, I didn't know I couldn't do this here. I didn't know this was a rule. So we want to avoid that. So here is how we can protect you. In the state of Florida, there is a law, Florida statute 718, I think what it is, something, that says that a seller is required to provide to the buyer a set of current condominium documents for you to review. Once you receive those, you have 3 days to review them, not including Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays. And if there is anything in those documents that you don't like, at your discretion, you can get out of the contract and get your deposit money back, and you're good to go. So here's what's included in those condo documents: the bylaws, articles of incorporation, rules and regulations, frequently asked questions, and the budget. So you can read through all those. And then, because you do have those 3 days to review, if you have questions, concerns, you can talk to the management company, talk to somebody who's on the board, talk to the treasurer if you have questions about the budget. Find those things out so you can have peace of mind knowing that this is the right place for you. And it's a wonderful safety net. And again, this is a Florida law thing. This isn't a Jill Thomas thing, a Sarasota County thing, Manatee County, a certain brokerage. Every agent in the state of Florida knows this, every licensee. And this is what I learned when I was taking the class. And I just felt really overwhelmed by all this because I didn't understand it all. I didn't know what articles of incorporation were or bylaws. But now I do. And now I can read condo docs pretty darn fast. So if there's something in particular that you have a concern with, I can quick find that for you and point it out to you in the condo docs. But I really, in the end, you need to be the one to review them, not me, because I don't know you, your lifestyle, certain things that may come up in the future. So it's really important for you to get your hands on those, to read them, to understand them. Sometimes we can get them before you go under contract. Sometimes we don't get them until after we go under contract. If it is afterwards, no worries. Like I said, you sign a piece of paper, you get out of it, the sellers sign it, you get your deposit money back, and we're good to go, and we'll find the next place for you. But then we've learned a bit more about you and your needs as well, so we can maybe have better success with the next property. So there we go, condominium documents, but we just call them condo docs, but it's those 5 things. So there we have it, 7 things that I think you really need to know about those rules and regulations when it comes to condominiums. And again, sometimes people do feel a little overwhelmed, feel a little anxious about the idea of buying a condo, especially if they've only maybe rented their whole lives or have only lived in a single family home. So I am no longer anxious about that. It's no problem for me. So if you do have questions, please give me a call. I'm so happy to help you out, talk you through all of that to help eliminate those fears, and I can help you navigate those waters. So if you have questions about condos or anything else about real estate in our area, you're thinking about coming here, you're thinking about leaving here, then please give me a call, text, email me. I'm happy to chat with you, help you to sort through all of those things so you can make really good decisions for yourself. All right, guys, I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day. Take care.